Very good evening to all of you. On behalf of Auditing and Assurance Standard Board of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, I welcome you all in today's first webinar organized by AASB of ICI this year. As we all are aware that last year AASB has organized 161 programs on the various auditing standards as well as various auditing aspects. So today is the first webinar, and again the topic is very important. We are going to cover two important standards, SA 50 and SA 530, that is audit evidence and audit sampling. And in order to tackle these two very important standards, we are having with us two eminent speakers, CA Utsav Dogra ji and CA Vikas Agarwal ji. So on behalf of AASB of ICI, I extend my warm welcome to both the speakers, CA Utsav ji and Vikas Agarwal ji. We are also having with us Honorable Vice Chairman of Auditing and Assurance Standard Board, C. Vishal Doshi ji. So I request Honorable Vice Chairman sir to please give his opening remarks and welcome address. Over to you, Honorable Vice Chairman sir, please.
Thank you very much, Anil Lalji, and a very good afternoon to all our participants who have joined for this first webinar of this council year 2024-25. I also take this opportunity to welcome our guest speakers, CA Utsav Dogra ji and CA Vikas Agarwal ji. I also welcome and thank the presence of our moderators, CA Ritu Sharma ji, CA Astha Gupta ji, CA Geetika Taneja ji and CA Pooja Sharma ji, who would be moderating the session today, a very important session. Well, friends, at the outset, I would like to thank Anil Lal ji and the whole team at the AASB and all our participants for the wonderful year that we had last year. As he mentioned, we had a total of 161 programs in physical as well as virtual mode, and there were more than 130,000 beneficiaries of these programs. A total of 457 structured CPE hours were allotted to these programs, which covered 72 branches of the ICI and 164 unstructured CPE hours, which covered the 82 webinars that were hosted by the AASB. A variety of topics were covered right from the standards on audit and the engagement and quality control standards, the review engagement standards, auditing of various items of the financial statements, the different terminologies, CARO, the statutory requirements of Companies Act, audit trail, forex transactions, and industry-specific webinars were also covered, such as real estate, education, IT, oil and gas, power sector, etc. Even we had some unique topics covered, like there were discussions on the QRB findings, laws and regulations in an audit of financial statements, key considerations in audit of LLPs, and we look forward that even this year, we would be having such programs in physical mode at the various branches as well as through the online mode through webcast. And we would look forward for active participation from all of you. And in this context, I would also like to invite suggestions from your side to the AASB that which are the areas of audit or the industry-specific topics that you would like us to cover. So that it would help not only you, but our other professionals in the fraternity as well. Friends, the topic for discussion today is very important. The SA 500, that is audit evidence, and SA 530, audit sampling. Since we have the expert speakers, I would not like to delve into detail, but I would like to share that these two aspects of audit evidence and audit sampling are primary to our audit. When we start any audit, even in our office, our team and all, they question that what is the audit sample and how this sample is to be selected. I think this is a primary concern, or I would say the first aspect when we start any audit. And to that, I would also like to share that there are different methods of the audit sampling that can be adopted based on the I would say the risk assessment of the client and the industry that the client is working in, and also with respect to the materiality thresholds, the materiality levels that are determined as part of the initial audit documentation. So a very important topic that we are having, and this is right at the beginning of the audit season. Audit season, I would say, especially considering that the months of April and May, we would be closing a lot of audits of the listed companies and large corporates. And when we talk of the, because till December, typically we would have done a limited review, and this is the time that the audits actually begin, and therefore audit sampling is of utmost importance. The second topic that is to be discussed today is on the audit evidence, which is again very important, and especially when we talk of the regulatory oversight that our professional practice units are subject to when we say things like the or the I would say the boards like the peer review board, the quality review board, and now even the NFRA, the audit evidence, because the evidence, I believe, is the fundamental to the basis of your the audit opinion. You know, whether you are giving a modified opinion or an unmodified opinion, it's the audit evidence which would ultimately lead you to that audit opinion, and therefore the evidence and the maintenance or preservation of that evidence in our audit files becomes extremely important. And I'm happy that we are having two expert speakers today who would guide us through these two important standards. So once again, on behalf of the AASB, I welcome you all to this first webinar of this council year. And thanks to the entire team whom you can see on the screen for giving their time for the AASB. Thank you, and wish you all the very best and a very happy learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your words of wisdom as well as welcome address. If you kindly permit, can we start the proceedings of the further proceedings, sir? Thank you, sir. So now may I request Vice Chairperson of Jalandhar Branch, Sri Ritu Sharma ji, to please start the proceedings of this webinar and please proceed. Over to you, Ritu ma'am, please.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. I, CA Ritu Sharma, Vice Chairperson of Jalandhar Branch of NIRC of ICAI, welcome all the participants on this very important webinar, Audit Evidence and Audit Sampling, organized by the SSB Board of ICAI. As a chartered accountant, we play the most important role of an auditor. But due to the complexity of daily changing nature of the economy, the continuous upgradation of knowledge in this field is very important. I thank to AASB of ICI, lead by vibrant team of our respected Vice Chairperson CA Vishal Sir and Chairman CA Dr. Sanjeev Singhal ji. Due to their continuous effort, this is the third program in the span of 10 days under this concept. Now, not taking much time, I request CA Geetika Taneja to start the session. Thank you, sir. Over to you, Geetika ma'am.
Thank you, Ritu ma'am. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and Vishal sir for again setting up the context. I'm very excited to host today's discussion that brings us to the heart of auditing standards, focusing on SA 500 and SA 530. Both these lay the groundwork for gathering sufficient and appropriate evidence to support the auditor's opinion on financial statements. Talking specifically of SA 530, audit sampling, it guides auditors in the strategic use of sampling techniques to efficiently assess entire populations. But we have with that for us our expert for today, Mr. Vikas. He is going to speak to us on SA 530. But before he does that, let me give a brief introduction about Mr. Vikas. Vikas ji is a chartered accountant from ICI, and he has worked in statutory audit divisions and handled multiple sector clients, namely fintech, oil and gas, fertilizers, etc. Without much, I will hand over to Vikas Agarwal ji to speak on the relevant topic. Thank you.
Sorry, Geetika ma'am, because Utsav sir has to leave. So Utsav sir will start the start the session. And before that, I request Astha madam to please kindly introduce Utsav sir and then start the presentation.
Thank you, Anilji. Good evening, everyone. Respected Vice Chairman, our speakers for the day, CA Utsav Dogra and CA Vikas Agarwalji, fellow moderators and members of the profession. I am CA Astha Gupta, a practicing chartered accountant based in Delhi. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Auditing and Assurance Standard Boards of ICAI for hosting webinars on such important topics at a regular pace for the benefit of our professional fraternity. Our first topic for the day is SA 500, Audit Evidence. As Vice Chairman Sir rightly said, that audit evidence is the fundamental concept of any audit. On the basis of audit evidence only, the auditor is able to expresses or her opinion in the audit report, whether it is modified, unmodified, and so on. So the quality of audit evidence determines how good an audit has been conducted and how, if the management is giving true and fair view of the financial health in the financial statements or not. Our first speaker of the day, who will be addressing on SA 500, is CA Utsav Dogra. He is a fellow member of ICAI, qualified in the year 2016. He is certified in FAFD from ICAI. He is also a member of the CP Australia and a graduate of Delhi University. He holds specialization in audits of subsidiaries of foreign companies established in India, India entry-level strategy, GST advisory and litigation, and compliance and litigation in international taxation. Right in the year of qualification, he had been appointed by the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs, CBIC, as a master trainer to the IRS and other officers for GST back-end and front-end application. He has been invited by various commissionerates of GST and many corporates to deliberate on various topics of GST and in-house corporate trainings. He's also been invited as a guest faculty to impart training to Indian Civil Account Services, ICAS, probation officers, pay and account officers of various ministries at the Institute of Government Accounts and Finance, National School of Drama, Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, MSMEDA, on various topics. He has also been regularly invited by the ICAI as a guest speaker at various webinars and seminars. He was a special invitee to the prestigious Indirect Tax Committee of ICAI for the year 21-22, and last year he was also appointed as a special invitee to the Student Skill Enrichment Board of the ICAI. It is our immense honor to have such an esteemed speaker like CA Utsav Dogra on today's panel. So without any further ado, I would like to invite CA Utsav Dogra ji to deliberate on SA 500 audit evidence. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. And first of all, I would like to extend my many thanks to the chairman, AASB, CA Sanjeev Singhal ji, the vice chairman, CA Vishal Doshi ji, my fellow guest speaker, CA Vikas Agarwal ji, and all the moderators. This is the first time seeing such a large panel for the moderators, and this is so wonderful to see all the women around here. And a very warm welcome to all the participants. So today we are starting the session with the audit evidences, SA 500. So give me a few moments. Let me share a PPT along with you. I guess I would be able to do it here myself. Is it visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Give me a moment, just I need to put it on the slideshow mode. Yeah.
Fine, sir. Fine.
So let us first understand the meaning of the audit evidences from the point of view of an auditor. From the layman's language, we understand the audit evidences are plainly the documents and the information that we receive or that we may not receive from the auditee to place an opinion, the audit opinion upon. As the standard itself says, that audit evidence is the record of the initial accounting, or it can be the invoices, the contracts, it can be the ledger and the journal entries, or it can be the records like worksheets, spreadsheets. It can be the minutes of the meeting or the written confirmation from the debtors and creditors, or it can be the manuals such as the internal control manuals, or it can also be the manual for the internal financial control. So all these form part of the audit evidences that which we can use to make a audit opinion to rely upon. So the information that is used by the auditor in arriving at a conclusion on which the auditor's opinion is based is basically the audit evidences. And it includes the information and accounting records and the other information which form part of the financial statement sometime, or which may not form part of the financial statement. But the important point to note over here is that audit evidences also includes the documents that which or the information that which we could not receive from the management as well. So because since we are not able to receive some information, our audit conclusion will also be based on that as well. Going further, So the relationship of audit evidence and the opinion of the auditor, we already understand that the audit evidence, if it is available and it supports the assertion of the management, that which the management claims, it is going to be a part of a positive affirmation towards the auditor's opinion. However, if the audit evidence is not available or it is contrary to the management's assertions, it is going to affect the auditor's opinion. So there exists a very important relationship between the audit evidence and the opinion of the auditor. The auditor needs to be very specific about what audit evidence that they have to rely upon, because there may be a gamut of information around the auditor at the time when he is auditing, because the environment may be new to him, or you can say the audit assignment is very new to him. So there may be a gamut of complete informations around him. However, it is very important to understand what forms part of the audit evidences. So we have to be very precise upon what is going to be a part of your audit evidence and how your audit conclusion shall be based on it. The auditor obtains such evidences from independent sources, from the dependent sources like directly from the management, or maybe independently like bank balance confirmation directly from the banks, or the debtors and creditors confirmation directly from the debtors and creditors. So based on these informations that which are available, they form part of the audit evidences, and thus the opinion of the auditor shall be framed upon them. I will be a little quick on taking these slides, because I will be talking a little more about the process of collecting all the audit evidences. So audit evidence has a basic nature of being sufficient and appropriate. These are the two attributes of the audit evidences. There should be neither too many so that the auditors get confused, or they should be not too less so that the auditor would not be able to place a reliance upon. Also, the quality of the audit evidence is also very important, and the quantity is also important. Just like my fellow speaker is going to talk about the audit sampling, where he is going to talk about the size of the sample that which needs to be collected. Similarly here, the quality and the quantity, they both matter here as well. The audit evidence must be sufficient in terms of the quantity which is there, which, like you can say that if we are doing physical verification of the stock, or maybe physical verification of the plant and machinery, and there are a number of plants which are available in India for the same auditee, or there may be a number of warehouses available. So we should be able to cover the sufficient quantity of the you can say plant and machinery, or the sufficient quantity of the stock at the time of doing the physical verification, to make sure that the audit evidence that we obtain from there in form of the physical verification report, in terms of its quantity itself. Also, the quality matters here. Let's say we are taking for the FDRs, we are taking a bank balance confirmation directly from the management. Rather taking it directly from the management, we must rely upon taking it from the external sources. So the quality of the audit evidence which is obtained from the external sources, like directly taking it from the vendors and creditors and debtors, or the bankers themselves, would be more reliable. So the quality of that audit evidence would be niche as compared to what we have been taking it from the management itself. The contracts are also very important here to understand, that we read the terms of the contracts at the time when we are collecting our audit evidences, because many a time it has been seen that the contracts may contradict with what the management is actually asserting in the financials. So that becomes another point that needs to be taken care of at the time when we are understanding about the appropriateness and the sufficiency of the audit evidences. Then going further, let us talk about the sufficiency of the audit evidence. I have just told you in a nutshell about the sufficiency of the audit evidences. Let us talk a little more in depth about the sufficiency of the audit evidences. The sufficiency is a measure of the quantity of the audit evidences. The quantity of audit evidences needed is affected by the auditor's assessment of the risk of material misstatement. So in a nutshell, we must say that the quantity should be sufficient. It should be good enough that it should cover the entire population of the size of the sample that we have taken, and it should be good enough that we can place our opinion upon. Similarly, if there is very high risk upon certain matters, if there are too large amount of FDRs appearing in the balance sheet, it can be an example of it. So we must not rely upon just taking a statement from the management that our FDRs are this much. We can always go for the banker to directly confirm the large amount of FDRs which are available there in the bank itself. So in that case, the evidence in terms of quantity will be the balance confirmation confirming all the numbers of the FDRs which are lying there with the bankers. So this would be a evidence that covers in total the entire you can say the entire size of that particular area of let's say asset at that time. Again, obtaining more audit evidences may not be compensated with the poor quality of the evidence. Just like we have been speaking of, the quality of evidence that we will get directly from the banker will be way more better than the quality of the evidence that we may be getting it from the management itself, specifically about the bank balances and the FDR balances lying there with, because we have seen like in every FD we also read it the Satyam scam where huge amount of bank balances have been shown. There the one of the major drawback which was concluded was the audit evidence that which was not collected directly from the banker itself. Had it been collected directly from the banker, it would have not been possible to show such a huge amount of cash balances deposits there with the banks itself. So taking the external confirmation for the necessary items so that it covers wherever it is necessary, it covers the entire population of that particular area. So the risk could be mitigated or it could be reduced to a very low level, so that we would be, as an auditor, we would be able to comfortably place our reliance upon it and we would be able to frame the opinion. Similarly, when we talk about the quantity of the audit evidences, we must ensure that either we get the evidence or we don't get the evidence. Both the things should be getting its place in our audit opinion. In case we are unable to obtain certain evidences in the required quantity itself, that should also affect the auditor's opinion. It should not be that the entire population is there and we are talking about an entire important population of certain aspect of the balance sheet, and that which a few of the documents are available and we are placing our reliance upon it. If an entire population is very highly sensitive, it must be covered with the amount of sufficient audit evidence along with it. So the quantity matters here. However, when we talk about the quantity, quantity cannot be compromised with the quality. So the second aspect is the appropriateness of the audit evidences. Yeah. So second portion is, so I guess I have covered all these 3 points: the size of the population, the risk of material misstatement, and the materiality. I have already explained all 3 points in relation to the sufficiency of the audit evidences in terms of its quantity, that which should be available with the auditor. Then we come to the appropriateness of the audit evidence. How appropriate the evidence is. Relevance is the first attribute when we talk about the appropriateness of the audit evidence. An irrelevant document that which has been submitted by the auditee cannot be relied upon, or it cannot be said to be the one audit evidence. The area that we are auditing must be having the audit evidences only in connection to that area. So the quality is again a very major role to play with here. So the relationship of the evidence with the audit procedure and the assertion that is being checked. So in nutshell, this becomes a very important aspect of the audit evidence. The quality should not be compromised anywhere at all. Even if you take a small sample of the audit evidences from the whole chunk, your quality should be the best possible, that which is available. Then again, the procedure how the audit evidence has been obtained by the auditor itself. then it also affects the appropriateness of the audit evidence. Again, like we are taking a balance confirmation directly from the debtors and creditors, or the management is taking the balance confirmations. They both are different from each other. We must rely upon the document that which we have obtained directly. Similarly, certain documents that which have been produced by the management itself, relying upon the management's expert, which they have drafted. Instead, if we do have the capability to assess all those documents, rather than just plainly relying upon the management's experts documents that which have been submitted to us, we can also take a assertion over there as well. Different sources and different natures may often be relevant for checking the assertions. Like a source that which the management has told us to obtain certain information. If we can find out the newer ways, or if we know already the other ways to find out the same kind of an audit evidence for the particular findings, so we must take care of that as well. That how would we be able to find out the other ways of finding an audit evidence that which supports the assertion of the management, rather than taking from the traditional way the management is showing us. Then the collectability of the complete audit evidence is also very important. That how frequently you are able to collect it, or how well you are able to collect it. It is not just that you have taken it once in a year and it is good. Like we can say that the management has taken a ICUFR report from the last year, and relying upon the same, you are just concluding the audit this year as well, considering it to be an audit evidence. That cannot work. Every year the ICUFR has to be done. The matrix has to be changed. So we also have to understand how management and its internal controls are working at the time when we are collecting the audit evidences, or how well they are stored with them. Then comes the sources of audit evidences. The audit evidences that are collected by performing the audit procedures, we have been talking of the same, like collecting it directly from the banker or the debtors or the creditors. This becomes a very important part of the audit evidence collection. The source plays a very important role. The sources that which are coming from the management itself, they are less reliable as compared to the sources which are coming directly from the unrelated parties or uncontrolled parties. They are more reliable. So either way, you can see that some of the time debtors have their balances differences as compared to the management that which they are claiming in their books of accounts, or the creditors may be having up differences in balances. So that only you will get to understand or know once you start once you start collecting your audit evidences, rather than just relying upon these statements given by the management itself. So the auditors must try to collect the audit evidences from their own sources. So the outside sources are more reliable and they're more evident as compared to the inside sources. Similarly,
one question, sir.
Yeah.
No audit evidence was there, but event we can check the event is there. Presence of an event, like certain expenditure is there, presence of fixed asset in the premises. Then what we have to do as an auditor? Like
that is what I have already told about. The procedure of collection of the audit evidence also makes a difference here. I was just about to say that, which is just coming next to it, is that you must be getting a report from the management that the fixed assets and the inventories have been checked by them.
In certain case, if a fixed asset is there and it's a second-hand machinery, and someone give the affidavit that I have sold this machinery, and that person is not related to the management, in that case, we should take it as an audit evidence, or
I believe that in that case, nowadays, just giving an evidence would not be sufficient, because there must be an invoice drawn to it. In case there is no invoice, there must be, again, coming to the relevant part. Again, I just have told you that we need to apply different sources of collecting the information. You can check the 2A, 2Bs, because they must have drawn
I know
invoice for the same.
that is the thing, but sometimes there is not a typical kind of organized sector from which the expenditure is.
In case of completely unorganized sector, in case as an auditor, I would believe that in case the payment has been done from the bank itself for buying the asset,
Yeah.
and if there is no invoice for the same, it would be really hard to digest. In case the person is able to give me a affidavit for the same thing. However, he is not able to give me a invoice for the
The
same.
bank payment is also there.
Bank payment is also there, and the person is accepting that they have already sold the same to us. We should believe it. I completely would fall for this. Because at the time when you get it scrutinized from the income tax department again, they would be asking for an invoice, or the person himself to come over and say that whether they have sold it or not.
Yeah.
The person should be the same. You have to identify. It should not be Ram who has actually sold it, or the Ram is the other person who is giving the affidavit. So the person has to be the same. You have to make your judgment over there.
That is a particular auditor's judgment is important in that.
Yes, that is completely the auditor's judgment. Auditor again is a watchdog. He is not a bloodhound. Whatever the documents that which are available, we have to consider that as the audit evidence. If based on our professional skepticism, if that audit evidence is sufficient to cover the risk, I believe that the judgment should be based on that only.
Thank you, sir.
Right?
Thank
So yeah, so we have been talking the same way through the performance of such audit procedures. So this would again be a audit procedure thing, which would come to us that the document that which is available is not the tax invoice, you can say, or the invoice or the performer invoice or whatever, but we have a person who is claiming that he has already sold the material to us, be it second-hand machinery, completely coming from an unorganized sector. The chances are very low. I would not say the chances are very high for this, because machinery is such kind of a thing that which cannot be sold without a transportation bill or without a proof against it.
Yeah.
There must be something as a proof for the transportation of the material as well. There must be some proof of, let's say if it is coming from the cross borders, so there must be some toll taxes paid around it. So some kind of the documents must be there. However, in case there is no document at all, then again the professional skepticism comes to the place, and the person has to rely upon the documents that which are available. If they are completely genuine, then we can completely frame an opinion based on that as well. Right? So the information from the source of independent entity that the auditor may use as an audit evidence may include the confirmation from the third parties, analysis report, the comparable data about the competitors, or whatever. Like in case of we do affidavit, we do transaction check for the related party transaction. They will write that it is a transaction which is based on the arm's length price. So while summing up such a statement that the arm's length price has been paid for the certain things which are coming from the related parties, we have to understand whether the same thing has been purchased from the unrelated parties as well, and the prices are same given the same kind of economic circumstances or the same kind of credit period and the same credit lines. So there also the comparable data is being used from the competitors maybe, or from the other vendors maybe, to understand such. So this also becomes a part of the audit evidence, right? Then the audit procedure to obtain the audit. So again, this includes the risk assessment procedure. What kind of the organization is, what are the ways how the test controls have been placed by the organization, what risk which actually matters in collecting the information or preserving the information with the organization that we can place a reliance upon to draft our opinion. The audit evidence should be coming from a risk-free environment as compared and should be relied upon more as compared to the one coming from a risky environment where the tempering can be done. Right. So this kind of a classic case I tell you about, that there was a client that we had, and a massive fire broke out at their premises, and for about 6 to 7 months record, they were burned. They were not having any record for that. So we had a complete challenge over there, that all the companies that which were there coming from the organized sectors, we could easily identify their invoices, taking it as a confirmation from the vendors, also taking their ledger balances and then drawing the books of accounts and comparing with them, because there was no physical record available with us. There were no invoices available with us. However, the complete unorganized sector that which had been posed to us, which was there, that we have done so many petty expenses at the sites itself, for which there were no record available with us. So again, we had to completely, management has given it they had given it as an affidavit to us that this all head of expenses that we have incurred, and since the massive fire broke out, we are unable to produce before you the documentary evidences against the same. However, these all are the unregistered vendors, and this much amount of cash has actually been spent over the period of time for about 6 months, that which we do not have a back working with right now. But these are the heads of the expenditure, since it has already been accounted for in our books of accounts. So in such a case, it becomes really difficult for the auditor to rely upon the statement of the management itself. So we had to do a complete backworking for the same. We had to do a few sample checks because it was a completely risky environment for us. So we have to do a complete check for we have to put a complete set of audit procedures again to identify whether whatever is being claimed as an expenditure for these 6 months for which there is no record available, that too for the expenses which are of really petty nature, like site expenses, like milk every day, which they have been buying a lot of groceries for their site people, and so many other things. So whether the same amount of cash has been withdrawn from the respective bank accounts, whether the same amount of petty cash has been given to the people over there at these sites, and whether they have some kind of proof with them, like their Paytm receipts, or maybe whatever they had. So we had to put a lot of audit procedures, yet we could not satisfy ourselves with the amount of cash that which was being claimed by the SSB. So in that case, we had to draw a negative conclusion in the audit report. So again, I would say that even if you have the documentation, even if you don't have the documentation, both the things are going to matter a lot at the time when you are concluding your audit, and you have to ultimately rely upon, in your auditor's opinion, whether the audit evidences are sufficient or not, whether the audit evidences are coming from a quality or not, or the procedures around which that you have applied, whether they are sufficient itself or not. So again, further, the audit procedure comprises of the test of controls, which required by the SA or when the auditor has chosen to do so, and the substantive procedure, including the test of details and substantive analytical procedures. Similar way, that just the example that I have said before you about the fire that broke out, both the things are covered within the example itself. So I think we should move forward with the procedure of obtaining the audit evidences. It can be the inspection. In the inspection, you can physically inspect the documents, you can physically inspect the stock which is lying there, you can physically inspect the machinery which is lying there. You can do the observation itself from the documentary evidences, and otherwise also you can visit the sites and you can see a lot of things. Then external confirmation, that we already know. We have been, as a practice, we have been taking it, either positive confirmation or the negative confirmation from the debtors and creditors itself, or the bankers maybe. Then recalculation. This is the method where, just like I told you, recalculation is the method that we had applied at the time when there was instance before us, that we had to completely calculate whether the costs are actuals or not. And similarly, at the time when the cost sheets are being produced, I believe that every auditor at that time, from the P&L account, from the trading account itself, they have to start doing the recalculation work themselves to identify whether the costing that which they are claiming right now, it's kind of an analytical procedure again, which we have to put on the ground, that we have to come to the sale price and the profit margin itself again. Then reperformance can be done just to obtain the audit evidences itself. Analytical procedures are applied in every audit almost. And I believe that comparing with the last year's profitability, comparing with the last year's expenditures, comparing with the last year's debtors and creditors ratio is always a part of our audit that we have been doing for ages. So this again become a very important part of the audit evidences. And then the last one is the inquiry, that you can do the roving inquiry yourself with the debtors and creditors to identify the prices of the things, whether they have been underbilled or overbilled for a over period of time. So the type of audit evidences, through its nature, it can be a visual, it can be a oral or it can be a documentary evidence. Visuals and oral, they are the least trusted. Documentary evidences are the most trusted ones, because since you have something on the document that you can take upon. Again, I would say visual evidences, if they are turned into document, like taking pictures and putting them to your audit file, this becomes a more solid evidence as compared to you have just gone and seen something, or you have just heard from others. This becomes a more solid audit evidence as compared to you heard it from someone, or you just saw it from your eyes. So putting everything onto the document is one thing that we have been doing for a very long time. And as auditor, I would always promote that you must trust only the documentary evidence that which is available. But again, documentary evidence coming from the management on its letterhead would be least in terms of when we say the reliability of the audit evidence. Documentary evidence directly coming from a third party would always be more reliable.
Yeah.
Similarly, you can put the analytical procedure at the time when you are checking those documentary evidences as well, like checking it from the 2As, or checking it from the e-way bill record, or checking it from the e-invoicing record that you have. So that can be one thing which you can apply to check a few things around it. Then comes the source. So internal sources and external sources. Documentary ke andar just I have told you, like internal sources less reliable, external sources which are directly coming from the third parties are more reliable. So, and also these documents should be maintained with you either in the e-format or in your physical files itself, so that in case you have to prove upon certain authorities that how could you conclude this audit, or how your opinion was based upon this particular aspect of the audit. So you can always show it to the authorities that this was our basis of finding the conclusion onto it. For how long or for how short? So I believe every auditor know here that at least 6 to 7 or 8 years you must be holding your files with you, and thereafter you can burn them all. However, if it is a matter of international taxation, it goes to up to 16 years. Then again, the nature, evidence is obtained through the observation, like stock counts. You have gone yourself and you can take a stock count. Oral, least reliable, just the TCWG, those charged with corporate governance or management has given you an oral representation. It is the least reliable of all. Then documentary, it is the most reliable, like taking the invoices itself, taking the balance confirmations themselves. Again, the sources, internal and external. The source that which is internal is created by the client and the organization, like copy of the bills or the employee's wages sheet, or you can say the balance confirmations from the bank itself, which they have produced before you without any stamp. They are less reliable as compared to what we have obtained right from the third party sources, like bankers, like debtors and creditors, or can be anybody else. So I guess I have, in a nutshell, I have covered the entire essay 500 for the audit evidences, including the source of the audit evidence, including the reliability or the way how we should collect the audit evidences. If there would be any question, I would like to welcome them now.
So my one question.
Yes.
Actually, the thing is that when there is an organized sector in a big cities and other cities, big firms, the audit evidence is completely available. But I mean, unorganized sector, what should we consider?
That is what I have told you, that the payment from bank becomes a very important part. Your payment vouchers having signatures of the recipients becomes a very important part, because there would be a lot of petty small amount of transaction which would be coming, which do not have any kind of surpair, as we say, which do not have any kind of documentary evidences around it. Because many
For
times
example, if the trader of the vegetables,
you will get to see a lot of small slips which are there in the petty cash counters, which may be getting fade over the period of time. That would be just a plain white color slip that would not be having even a single scratch of the ink. So you have to rely upon it. How would you rely upon it? You have to see what are the nature of the expenses. The analytical procedure would come over here. Whether the same kind of whether the same kind of expense has been incurred, or there has been a drastic increase in the same kind of expenditure from last year, you have to analyze it from the P&L. How much of the expenditure we have been doing in the last year from the petty cash book, and how much we are doing it right now, whether there has been a change in the circumstances around it or not. So basis that you can draw your conclusion on it. I'm completely aware of the fact that in the B towns or the sites that we have around the area, which are coming from the unorganized sector, there are a lot of supplies coming from them. So they do not provide as a professional invoices as compared to the other companies. But in that case, we have to do the analytical procedure around it. Only then we would be able to rely upon it, whether the same amount of cash is being withdrawn, or whether this petty cash is coming as a payable to the petty cash officer itself. whether there is a debit balance or the credit balance also makes a lot of difference, because nobody is going to make us expenditure from their own pocket, that too in thousands and lakhs,
Okay.
unless you give them in cash, right? So that becomes a very important part here to understand.
Yeah, thanks, Utsav. So
Yeah.
I would like to say a sincere, heartfelt, and a lot of gratitude from AASB, from all of us here, and from all the participants for a wonderful deliberation and presentation today. You rightly covered, all the aspects, important aspects of the audit evidence, which is a very critical part of being an auditor. So thank you so much. And then I would like to invite Mr. Vikas Agarwal for the next session.
Thanks, Pooja ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I would like to extend my warm thanks to Chairman Auditing and Assurance Standard Board, Mr. Sanjeev sir, Mr. Vishal sir of Vice Chairman Audit and Assurance Board, and I would also I am also happy to see the great deliberation of Mr. Utsav. So he actually bring the light to the entire SA 500, and I believe that 1 hour he spent is very useful to the listener, because it is very important to understand the validity of the evidence that we are collecting for the purpose of creating the opinion, and that is a main requirement to maintain the quality in the audits. So my standard is SA 530, which complements this SA 500, and it basically focuses on sampling area. So as we understood right now that there are audit procedures which is required as per SA 500, like inquiry, observations, recalculation, reperformance, analytics. So we have to also do the sampling. And for the sampling, there is a specific SA 530, as we all know. In coming 30-40 minutes, we will be having a quick revision in a crisp manner, and we will be having some practical examples also. So I am putting my PPT on the
I
screen.
would just like to come in for a brief moment. Utsav, thank you so much. I know you would be leaving, as sir informed Mr. Lal, by 5 p.m. because would request you to stay till 6:30. Maybe we have some questions from the participants. We can take them with you then.
It'll be really hard for me to stay.
Yeah. Vikas,
If there is
you
any question, you can direct me now, or
Yeah. So we'll take the questions right now, just
Yeah.
like within few minutes. So I have one question that sometimes what happens is, like Ritu ma'am rightly said, especially on the unorganized sector, you don't get enough or like sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. So many auditors, they resort to management representation letter, like MRN, as a substitute to audit evidence. So is it
Again, I
correct?
would say the area that which you are covering from the MRM, that makes a very important part. The
Okay.
stock, if you say that it is being covered by the MRN and there is no evidences around it, I would not digest the same as an auditor. However, if there are petty expenses that which are around, like the expenses from you can say over food, or the small expenses around over, let's say, puja expenses, or other petty expenses are there for which you do not actually get the supplies from the organized sector itself. Most of the time, the unorganized sector, they are actually involved into the companies to provide such kind of supplies to them. So I would say that if it is actually a major aspect of the balance sheet that which is getting affected, or the P&L is affected with that, I would not settle with just the management representation letter around. However, if it is something which is very petty, or you can actually put some analytical procedures to compare it from the last year, or if you know that there are certain circumstances which are there with the company that which has made a push to increase in the expenses or the decrease in expenses, be it the size of the team that which has increased, because if you see a lot of companies nowadays, they are putting free food for their employees, and if the size of the team has increased drastically, let's say from 20 people to 200 people, the food expense will automatically go up. And there may be a chance that the canteen person is not that equipped to give you always a complete bill for the same. He may be drawing it with their hand, or he may be giving a small slip that which gets faded with a period of time. So in that case, if you're relying upon the management's representation letter, for which you already know that circumstance is already there, so you can always rely upon it. You can do a ratio analysis of how much food that which is being allocated to a person, multiply by 200 number of people, and you can come to a rough figure around it. Then MRL is good. But if you say that you have bought a plant and machinery and you do not have a bill, so that is not digestible. You say that you have bought a lot of stock from some person and he's not having an invoice around it. That is not possible, because we all live in the age of GST. There is always a left-right movement. Everyone is sitting around there on the roads and corners just to capture the gadis which are traveling from one point to the other, that too without a valid bill. So they will be captured ultimately. So as an auditor, we always have to keep in mind that whether this is pragmatic or not,
Okay.
whether it can be or not.
Please continue. Sir. So in extension to the plant and machinery bit only, not like one of the audit evidences is to have a physical verification report of fixed assets or an FAR. So again, in a lot of small and micro entities, I have never, at least in my experience of like 7-8 years, I've never seen an FAR or maybe a PV report. But sometimes what we do is because we as auditors have to cover ourselves, so we resort to MRL and we mention that so and so FR, and especially when it comes to cargo compliance, because wahan pe it becomes compulsory. Like you have to report in that first clause about the
You
physical
have to be very
verification.
much specifically understanding the fact that the plant and machinery is such an essential part of the complete system that the production, or you can say the work, cannot be done without it. So there will be least chances that somebody is faking a plant and machinery available. You can at least visit the place. You can at least visit the place. You can at least just have a visual tour of the complete thing, right? Having a proper FAR drawn for the same may not be possible for MSME, but at least having their invoices in the system, having a back credit working with the same, that would always be available. So that is one part that we have as an auditor. We have to groom ourselves enough that we get to see that the production has multiplied. Let's say there must be an addition to the plant and machinery, because with the same existing, they were already working at the 100%.
Correct.
Or if the labor cost has multiplied along with it, so there must be a chance that they are working in 2 shifts right now, and the depreciation is simultaneously getting increased. Or the repair and maintenance is also getting increased just because, or the consumables are increasing just because they are working on the double shift now. Similarly, the sales side, the production side, they both are increasing. The stock register must reflect the same thing.
So basically, you need to look for indirect evidences.
Yes, analytical procedure becomes very important part for the auditor. I would never say that you should always be skeptical about whatever the management is saying. They can be having a genuine concern around it. We must be standing there with the auditees as well. But as far as our audit procedure are laid down there, and the evidences that we can make sure that which are there available that can support our audit conclusion, that must be obtained at least, and that should be retained with us as well.
True, very rightly said. Yes. My next question would be, what is the difference between SA 500 and SA 501? Like, how is it different?
SA 501, I will not touch that part right now, but SA 500, that would be the complete base upon how you have to collect what is an audit evidence, how the audit evidence is it is completely synced with your audit opinion, how your audit evidence is to be obtained, what should be the quality and what should be the quantity. It revolves around it.
Okay.
How should you retain the same?
Okay, and 501, because that also touches upon, it's like an extension of 500.
It's an extension of the same. Like you are getting your information directly from the company itself, or you're getting it from the outside sources. If it is to be the outside sources, what kind of source it should be, how it should be relied upon. What is the way of getting the information from there as well?
Okay, so that means when we are talking about audit evidence, so both SA 500 and 501 need to be catered. So that's
need to be taken care of completely. वैसे तो सारे essays are required to be taken care of at the time when we are doing the audit.
From audit evidence point of view.
Yeah, but they follow each other's back.
Right. Okay. Another question that I had was, so when I was going through the slide deck, you had mentioned about test of controls. Now, can you be a little specific, maybe through examples or illustrations, of what exactly is meant by test of controls?
Again, I would say the test of control. Let us say we do not have an ICOFR control test sheet with us.
That's where I'm coming from, because normally we don't.
Yes,
So
because
that's
a
why.
lot of organizations, a lot of auditors I have seen, they never have an ICOFR metrics drawn for them, but they have a complete para written for that.
Paragraph
Yes,
in the report.
every
True.
control is there in the place and the controls are being followed by the companies. So when we say the test of controls, a small example, do you see that how the invoices that which are there available, how are they placed in the organization? I know one company which actually places all its invoices in a flat which is way far from its own place, and sometimes a lot of rodents, they just jump over the invoices and they bite them all like anything.
Okay.
So what kind of
So
control is that?
documentation management.
Management's documentation, how does that matter? Then again, what kind of procedure of procurement, let's say, is there? If this kind of a company it is that which actually makes an expenditure, and after that they find out whether we can get the invoice from the person or not, or is this kind of a company that actually draws first a PO and then selects the person and then makes a vendor placement of the order and then gets the delivery done? So what kind of a test that you can establish here, that whether you have to rely upon on the first part itself, or in your test procedure, whether you have to go throughout the series of the events that which are there? No. So this kind of a test I'm talking about. And in ICOFRs also, we draw the same kind of thing only if it is a, let us say it is it's an employee benefit matrix that we have drawn. So we first have to find out what are the type of benefits that which we are giving, who is the entitlement and who is the person following in it, then concluding it based on the number of people around it. And then we have to further put on the test that whether this much expenditure has been done on the same, whether this much expenditure has been done on this particular sector. Again, the expenditure, whether they are being supported by some kind of evidences or not. Again, this is a complete matrix which needs to be drawn. Again, obtaining the audit evidences, that too followed by the test procedures which are there. Test procedures can also include your analytical skills there as well.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess that covers your question here.
So I'm done with my questions. Any other moderator would like to ask further questions? I have to leave also.
I have a question, Utsavji. So talking of test of controls, and you mentioned there are paragraphs written in every organization. How does SA 500 address the use of expert opinions as audit evidence, and what criteria should auditors use to evaluate?
I would say that you must be getting at the time of when you are in the financial statements, you must be getting one expenditure that would be the provision for the gratuity. And for the provision of the gratuity, you must be getting a report from the actuarial, whether you have to trust that or not.
Yeah, I mean, how do we rely on that?
You would be able to do the calculation as an actuary, then you must rely upon it. Otherwise, So again, I would say here, whether you have to check whether the expert that is, because I remember I did this kind of a essay previously in the seminar as well, the work of the externals that which we are using. So again, whether this person who is the actuarial valuation, is he an expert first of all? Whether he stands for his integrity in the market or not, that you can do an independent research upon. उसके ऊपर कोई पुलिस केस तो नहीं चल रहा है, that you also have to see whether he is a criminal or not, whether he is already convicted or not.
So we have to go to that level of
Yes, we have to go to
research.
that level. We have to go to its credibility. The credibility of report matters here.
Yeah.
Ultimately, with all these things, you are actually trying to find out the credibility of the audit evidence.
Right.
Whether that can be accepted or not. The external that would be coming up with their report, because they are pioneer in that. I am not a pioneer in valuation of the land and property.
Right.
But I have to see whether this person, the report that which has been received for, let's say, there is a leasing contract and they have taken the valuation of the leased land, and thereafter they have, according to the leasing standard Ind AS, maybe they have made a complete liability sheet after it, right? Liability and asset they have recognized in their balance sheets. But I have to see whether this person is IBBI recognized or not. Whether is he competent enough, whether he has actually visited the place or not, whether the invoices are there for his visit or the air tickets are there for his visit or not. Or is it just that we have paid him and he has given us a report that which the value that we wanted?
Yeah.
The credibility of report matters there. And how you find out that the report is credible or not. We cannot enter their domain, certainly, but we can question their report basis on the things around it. Right?
Thanks, Utsav. A small
Yes,
question
that
from
makes
my
sense.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Gitika, for asking the question. I would just like to touch upon SA 505. Could you just like give a brief, hint on the positive confirmation request and negative confirmation request for our audience?
Positive again, I would say never go for a negative.
Can you differentiate between the two?
Negative means you have nothing to say, and I believe whatever it is true. Positive is always you are giving your ledger itself. See, these are the entries that which are there appearing in my balance sheet or my books of accounts in your ledger, and these entries must coincide with your entries that which you have in your ledgers. So always go for an affirmation. Don't go for a negative confirmation for that.
Thank you so much, Utsav, for your time and everybody's patience. Because I would like to call you again for your deliberation.
So before ending, I would like to extend my thanks to specifically to the AASB team. They always invite me, Mr. Lal, despite of me nagging every time to come over. He always pulls me up to come to take a session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Sanjeev,
so much.
for
Thank
giving
you
me this
so much, Utsav
opportunity.
ji, for in spite of having his very, very, very busy schedule as well as a very personal commitment today, that is only the lifelong commitment today. I won't mention here, but he has given his precious time here. So thank you so much from the core of my heart for your wonderful session. Thank you
Thank you
so much,
so much.
Utsav ji.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
All the moderators
Thank
are wonderful, and I'm so glad that you have kept them all. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so-
Thank you,
thank you,
Vikas, so
thank you.
much for
Thank
giving
you.
me so
Thank
much time
Thank you.
and listening it so patiently.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank
I
you.
request Vikas ji to please
Please.
start his deliberation.
And I
Over
would
to you,
take the lead.
Vikas ji.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank
Please,
you.
sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we are starting with SA 530. So
Yes, sir.
I'm putting my PPT on the screen.
Yes, sir.
Is
Fine.
my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Fine, sir. Fine.
So this SA 530 is effective from 1st of April 2009, and I will be dividing the entire content into 4 areas. Just a brief introduction, the objective, the main definitions, and what is the requirement of the standard. So first of all, as the introduction, this standard applies in order to decide the use of audit sampling in performing the audit procedures and to decide whether to use statistical sampling or non-statistical sampling when designing and selecting the audit samples, performing test of controls and test of details. This essay is complementary to SA 500, and this help us into obtain the sufficient and appropriate audit evidence to be able to draw the reasonable conclusion. Now, the objective of this standard is to provide a reasonable basis on the basis of which auditor draw the conclusion for the population from which sample is selected. Now, coming to the definitions. There are few definitions which everyone need to keep in mind while applying this standard. I'm going one by one. First is audit sampling. So application of audit procedure to less than 100% of item is known as audit sampling. The population is the entire set of data from which we are selecting the sample is the population. Sampling risk is the risk in the audit sample that we may be concluding the wrong conclusions which otherwise would not have happened. So sampling risk can be two types of erroneous conclusions. First, in case of test of control, that control are more effective than they actually are, or in case of test of detail that our material misstatement does not exist when in fact it does. The auditor is primarily concerned with this type of erroneous conclusion because it affects audit effectiveness. In case of test of control, the control are less effective, but they are actually, or in case the test of detail that a material misstatement exists when in fact it does not. So this type of erroneous conclusion affect the audit efficiency. Now coming to the non-sampling risk. The non-sampling risk that we are interpreting the evidence in a wrong manner, or we are taking the inappropriate audit procedure for performing the audit procedure. So we may be concluding the wrong conclusions. Anomaly is basically a item in the sample which does not represent the population. It can be due to some exception, due to some exceptional situation or something like that. Sampling unit is basically the individual item that constitutes in a population. It can be any unit. For example, check listed on deposit slip, credit entries on bank statement, sales invoices, or debtor balances. Statistical sampling. This is very important in this standard, that we should understand what is the difference between statistical sampling and non-statistical sampling. So statistical sampling coming to is basically which has two characteristics. One, the random selection of sample item, and the use of probability theory to evaluate the result. So if these two conditions applies, then we have to apply this statistical sampling. If any of these condition is not applicable, or the characteristics does not match these conditions, then we have to apply non-statistical sampling. Now there is a concept stratification. Stratification is basically dividing the population into subgroups. Every group is known as strata. Now, one concept is here tolerable misstatement. So, a monetary amount set by the auditor to obtain a appropriate level of assurance that the monetary item set by the auditor is not exceed by the actual misstatement in the population. That is known as tolerable misstatement. And in case of test of controls, there is tolerable rate of deviation. If that is similar like a tolerable misstatement, this is a kind of tolerable deviation that we are calculating the deviation from standard to actual. Now coming to the requirements of this essay. So I have divided the requirement into 5 stages. One is sample size, sample design, and selection of item. Second, performing audit procedure. Third, nature and cause of deviation and misstatement. Fourth, projecting misstatement. Fifth, evaluating the result. So, coming to the first point, when designing a audit sample, whenever we have to design an audit sample, we have to consider the purpose for which we are doing the audit procedure and characteristic of the population. So we have to decide that what is the purpose of obtaining the audit evidence, what is the procedure for which we are taking this sample. So when designing the audit sample, the auditor consider include specific purpose to be achieved and the combination of audit procedure that is likely to be best achieve that purpose. So the deviation or misstatement and what population to use for sample. So this have to be decided by the auditor while performing this audit procedure. So audit consideration for the purpose of audit procedure includes a clear understanding of what constitutes a deviation or misstatement. Now coming to the next point, with the perspective of test of control. Auditor make an assessment of expected rate of deviation. As we have read earlier, there is a tolerable rate of deviation. So similar kind of concept is here also, that we have to make an assessment of expected rate of deviation. For example, if the accepted rate of deviation is unacceptably high, the auditor would normally decide not to perform the test of control. Similarly, for the test of detail, the auditor makes an assessment of expected misstatement in the population And if the expected misstatement is high, then we have to 100% examine or use a large sample size as appropriate. The auditor have to determine the sample size, and sample size depend on different factors. I have tabulated few of the situations which affect the sample size by two perspectives: test of controls and test of details. So test of control, when there is an increase in extent to which auditor risk assessment takes into account relevant control, then we have to increase the sample size. Where the tolerable rate of deviation increase, then we have to decrease the sample size. If there is an increase in expected rate of deviation, then we have to increase the sample size. If there is an increase in desirable level of assurance that the tolerable rate of deviation is not exceeded by the actual rate, then we have to increase the sample size. An increase in number of sampling units in the population, then we have that it has a negligible effect on the sample size. With the perspective of test of details, an increase in auditor assessment of risk of material misstatement. If the risk increase, the sample size also increase. An increase in use of other substantive procedure. When we are relying more on the substantive procedure, then our sample size decrease. An increase in auditor desired level of assurance that tolerable misstatement is not exceeded by actual misstatement, then we have to increase the sample size. If there is an increase in tolerable misstatement, then we have to decrease the sample size. If there is an increase in amount of misstatement that auditor expect to find, then we have to increase the sample size. When we have stratification, that we have subgrouped the entire population into different groups, then we have to decrease the sample size and we have to select the sample from the individual groups. The number of sampling units in the population, it has a negligible effect on the sample size. So we have understood that how we have to decide the sample design, how we have to decide the sample size. Now, what are the methods of selecting the items for testing? There are namely five methods which the standard specifies by which we can select the sample from the population. And sample should be selected in such manner that there is a equal probability for every item in the population of being selected, so that it will be unbiased. The methods which are specified in the standard is: first, random selection; second is systematic selection; third is monetary unit selection; fourth is hazard selection; and fifth is block selection. As the name specifies itself, random selection means randomly we are selecting any of the item. It can be anywhere from any item from the from the population. Systematic selection is like we are deciding some interval or we are putting some criteria for selecting the sample. Monetary unit sample is basically we calculate a MUS through the sampling softwares, and that MUS is applicable to the sample population, and then the system automatically fetches out the sample and it decides the number of samples to be selected. This is basically a system driven unit which is calculated by the softwares. Hazard selection is basically we are not following any structured technique, then we do hazard selection. Block selection is basically we stratify the data into sub groups, and then we are selecting the sample from the group wise data. So now the as we have to perform the audit procedures, now what is the effect of sampling in our audit procedure? So we have to perform the audit procedure for each item selected. If like we have run the sampling method and we have selected a sample, then we have to apply the audit procedure on that sample. And if it is not possible to perform the procedure, then we have to take the replacement item. For example, it is when it is necessary to perform the procedure on replacement item is when a cancel check is selected while testing. If auditor is satisfied that check has been properly cancelled, then it does not constitute any deviation. Point to be noticed that if auditor is unable to apply the designed audit procedure or suitable alternative procedure, then it is a deviation and it will affect your report in case of test of detail. What are the nature and causes of deviation and misstatement which are specified in the standard? We have to investigate all the deviations or misstatement identified after doing sampling. We have to evaluate what will be the effect of the deviation or misstatement for the entire population. In extremely rare circumstance, when auditor consider a misstatement or deviation discovered in a sample to be an anomaly, the auditor shall obtain a high degree of certainty that such misstatement is not representative of the population. For now, how we have to project the misstatement? For test of detail, the auditor shall project misstatement found in the sample to the population. The auditor is required to project misstatement for the population to obtain a broad view of the scale of the misstatement, but this projection may not be sufficient to determine the amount to be recorded. When a misstatement has been established as an anomaly, we cannot take it as a representative of the population. For test of control, no explicit projection of deviation is necessary, since the sample deviation rate is also projected deviation rate for population. SA 330 provide guidance when deviation from control upon which the auditor intend to rely are detected. Now evaluating the result of audit sampling. The auditor shall evaluate the result of sample. For test of control, an unexpectedly high sample deviation rate may lead to a assessed risk of misstatement, unless further audit evidence substantiate the initial assessment is obtained. In case of test of details, the projected misstatement plus anomalous misstatement is the auditor best estimate of misstatement in the population. When the projected misstatement plus anomalous misstatement exceeds tolerable misstatement that does not provide a reasonable basis for conclusion about the population that has been tested. The closer project misstatement plus anomalous misstatement is to tolerable misstatement, the more likely that actual misstatement in the population exceeds the tolerable misstatement. Also, if the projected misstatement is greater than the expectation of misstatement used to determine the sample size, the auditor may conclude that there is an unacceptable sampling risk that actual misstatement in the population exceeds the tolerable misstatement. So we have to determine whether the misstatement which will be actually there in the population exceeds the tolerable misstatement. Whether the use of audit sample has provided a reasonable basis for conclusion about the population that has been tested. If auditor conclude that sampling has not provided a reasonable basis, he may request the management to investigate misstatement that have been identified and for further misstatement and make necessary adjustment or tailor the nature, time and extent of further audit procedures. So now this I have covered this entire essay, and let me know if there is any query.
Sir, I have a question, Kasji.
Yes.
I want to ask, like, how does the auditor address deviations or errors found within the sample?
Yes, when we have identified the deviation, we have to link it with the materiality which we have decided for the audits. And if it exceeds the materiality level, then we have to further investigate what is the reason behind the deviation, and we have to minutely calculate the reason for all the plus and minus for a deviation. For example, suppose the sales number of this year are changed with the sales number of previous year. So we have to examine whether these are due to new products, whether this is due to new geographical areas, whether this is due to discontinuation of any old product. So this way we have to analyze the entire reason for the deviation in the during the audit procedures. Now
Mm,
the questions come that how we have to evaluate that. Suppose there is a population of 100 and we have taken a sample of 10, and we found that 5 out of those samples are erroneously recorded. So we have to evaluate that what is the effect of that deviation on the entire population. And sometimes we have to get into the detailed checking of the entire population to accurately decide what has to be the adjustment passed in the books of accounts to effect the correction of that deviation. So this is also guided by the standard that we have to use the sampling procedure just to have efficiently using the audit procedures and deciding on the uh, correctness of the entire population.
So, sir, if there are errors within the threshold, how do you
Yeah.
extrapolate the results to the entire population?
There is a concept of tolerable misstatement or tolerable deviation as mentioned in this standard. And as per the experience and as per the knowledge of the auditor, they decide what will be the tolerable limits for those clients. Suppose we have a 0.5% of rate of deviation which is tolerable, or 0.01% of rate of deviation which is tolerable due to rounding off, due to something there are few items which get reshuffled, reclassified. So that is the experience of the auditor that helps him deciding what should be the tolerable misstatement threshold. And in case the items are within tolerable misstatement threshold, then we need not to perform the further audit procedures on those things, because there might be some another thing which required more attention of the auditor than that thing.
Yeah. And
So
Mikashi,
this
how
is
do we? Yeah, I think that makes sense. And like, what exact documentation is required when you find some misstatements or a proportion is erroneous? Is there any specific documentation need for that?
what we generally do at the planning stage of audit. We take the entire trial balance, or we take the listing of the entire financial statement line items, and we mention the type of sampling which we have, whether we have applied the sampling or not, or we have done the 100% testing. And in case we have applied the sampling, whether it falls within the statistical sampling or non-statistical sampling. So we should tabulate those things so that we have control on the entire items, that we how we have decided and whether we have decided it correctly or not. It when it get documented, it will help in conducting the audit for the other clients also.
Yeah. And when
So
it comes to,
this is how we document this.
okay, that makes sense. And when it comes to, as you mentioned, statistical and non-statistical sampling, do we do both or do we go by one? Like, how does the
See,
auditor decide?
the as the standard specifies, when there is random selection possible and the probability theory can be applied, then we should apply the statistical sampling.
Okay.
Or when there is a situation, then we have not to select the random sample, or we have not to select the we cannot apply the probability theory to that sample, then or that particular item, then we have to apply the non statistical sampling. For example, I would say like there are accounts receivables. There are 100 ledgers in accounts receivable. Now we cannot take that if five ledger out of those 100 ledger are incorrectly maintained, that doesn't mean that all the 100 ledgers are incorrectly maintained, or the balance confirmation of any five ledgers is not received. That doesn't mean that all the balance ledgers confirmation cannot be received. So there we cannot apply the statistical sampling. But
Mm.
suppose there is a system driven sales mechanism. Suppose that is a fintech and it
Right.
has thousands of transactions on daily basis, and there is some minute commission which is to be paid to the banker and which is to be paid to the merchant. So now if there any mistake happens, then it will be happening across all the transactions. So there we can apply the statistical sampling, and there we can, because random selection is possible, probability theorem is also possible to be systematic flow of data, and that data is affecting that is recorded in your books of accounts by some way, then you can apply the statistical sampling.
So basically, it's judgment of auditor where to
it's
apply random
completely
and
it's
where to.
completely technical. It's completely technical that you know where you can you select the sample like usual, and you can apply the probability theorem to just to evaluate the level of misstatement that can be possible. Suppose if a wrong rate of commission is deducted, that means that all the transactions are calculated on the wrong rate. So that
Mm.
means the probability theorem can be applied. But
Right.
if that is account receivable or accounts payable or stock items, then in that case it is not that case. So this is basically the practical difference between the two concepts.
Mm. Okay. Thank you, Vikas. I think that was really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank
Maybe.
you, madam. But now we are starting the further questions. Pooja, madam, you are having any question? Pooja, madam, can you hear me? Kindly unmute
Yes,
yourself,
sir.
Pooja, madam.
Yes, sir. I was on mute. Vikasji, thank you so much for the deliberation. So I would just like to know, your tabular, representation, which factors, you had, how the factors influence, the sample size for the test of controls and the
Yes.
test of details. That was very helpful. So, could you throw light upon, when there is an unexpected high sample deviation, rate, so that can
Yes.
lead to an increase in the assessed risk of material. So, what can we do in that case if
We
there is
have
a,
to increase the sample size. See,
okay,
whenever we see that conceptually, I would say whenever we see that the misstatement risk is high, or the controls are very low, or the any new information we came to know which our skepticism says that we should be more doubtful about that, then we have to increase our sample size. That is the basic concept behind all the conditions mentioned over there. If tolerable misstatement level that increases, then you have to decrease the sample size, obviously. And if that decreases, then you have to increase the sample size. If risk increases, you have to increase the sample size. If risk decreases, you have to decrease the sample size. If controls are effective, then you have to decrease the sample size. You can work, you can rely on the controls. If controls are inefficient, ineffective, then you have to increase the sample size, because error can be anywhere. And this is the basic concept behind the sample size.
yes.
Any other question, madam?
Sir,
Pooja,
regarding,
madam, any other question?
may I ask one?
Yes, madam, kindly, please ask.
Sir, audit evidence regarding inventory. Like one of my tractor unit, I can easily identify the tractors. But the spare parts and the other raw material, I'm not able to identify what kind of stock is there. Kindly enlighten on this kind of things.
So basically, for the I have conducted the tractor unit audit, stock audit. I have conducted this audit in Haryana. So, but I did not came to such. Yeah, that happens that there can be minute spare parts, and that has to be examined, or that has to be verified by the auditor for the purpose of stock audit. In that case, what we do actually is we see what is our materiality, and we list out the inventory and calculate its value, and then we take high value items, and for those high value items we have to apply our dynamic mind. Suppose there are nuts, and we know that there are 50 nuts in 100 grams, so we have to weigh the nuts. So if we weigh the nuts, we'll came to know that how many nuts will be there in the packet, or how many nuts will be there in the bucket. So this is how we'll apply our dynamic mind, and we verify those inventories in a easy manner. So this is basically very interesting when we are conducting the stock audits, that sometimes it is very challenging. The things are very, things are not marked properly. Suppose if you see a nut, there is no manufacturing date, there is no batch number, so how would you see? There is no identification. Anyone can fool you. That is a bigger challenge. So for those things, we apply a dynamic mind, and we try to we you apply materiality over there. We try to find out some way out by which we can count it easily.
The last 15 years, every year I'm not able to find the right way for spare parts.
Yes, that happens because I have also done so many.
Thank you, sir.
Because what kind of methodologies we can use, for AR and AP kind of transactions? Could you throw light upon them? How you've done it, and what is the best way you have found out those high volume of transaction APR balances helps us?
First of all, the most critical thing which I have seen is the related parties. We have to identify the related parties because that is the highest risky area. Now, going ahead, we have to select the parties for the balance confirmations. Now we have to check whether the client is making the quarterly reconciliations or not. They are taking balance confirmations with the customers and vendors, or how they are monitoring their ledgers, and directly indirectly by the sales audit and the purchase audit, all the things automatically links up, and the balance confirmation works, and the ledger scrutiny works. The 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 we we are checking the creditor ledgers for the TDS deductions also, so that works. So this is how we are. And the aging, we are that is the very important area, which is also amended in schedule 3. So the aging we have to check, which are overdue, what is the credit cycle, what is overdue amount, why that overdue amount is not received or paid, and whether nowadays there is a big discussion over MSME, that we have to pay the MSME creditors.
Yes.
So these are the perspectives which we have to see. The related party, I believe, is the most critical thing.
Yes, thanks.
Um,
Yes.
Yeah, Vikasji, thank you for such smooth deliberation. I have a question extending to the MSME requirement that you have mentioned here. Now, as an auditor, so like right now we are sitting in February, so we've already started instructing our clients that you should gather the information regarding MSME and categorize your creditors accordingly, so as to check the condition of the 45 days, 15 days, whatever is applicable. Now, as an auditor, when I come to audit sampling, so I can, if the categorization has been done properly by the, accounts team, then it'll be easier for me to understand and do the sampling. And then also, how do I determine if my sample that I've selected is correct or not? Because that's where the judgment process comes in, and that's where it becomes tricky for auditors like us to, comment. Do I need to document the basis of sampling that I'm doing? So that's my query.
Basically, we have to check whether the MSME confirmation letters are floated by the client to
True.
the vendors, and what is the status of that. So they should maintain a list of those emails and what is the response as on date, and you can cross verify the detail with that detail. So that works.
But in this case, let's say some, big clients whose vendor master runs into thousands, so it will be very difficult for us to go through each and every confirmation.
So there are softwares which those automatically do the the VLOOKUP thing. So there is no challenge with that, because there is a large volume data this software helps, but there is no
Okay.
other way.
Okay. Got it, got it. Also, when you were talking about, so I like that you said, you can pick the trial balance, and then you mentioned what is the percentage of, sampling that you've done for each and every item. Now, there could be, for example, maybe in an expense A, which was, at a very high percentage in previous year, and not this particular year, it's not at that high amount. So obviously, my sampling percentage has changed because I don't want to focus much. It's not a very high, alert item. So do I need to, as an auditor, just to safeguard myself, do I need to document the change in the sampling percentage or the basis? How did I arrive at that sampling percentage? That is also required at my end because right now we're not doing that just to improve our audit practice.
Okay, so coming to the profit and loss, if we see the
Hmm.
profit and loss statement, there is a change in inventory, material consumed, and then there is depreciation, employee benefit expenses, finance cost, and the main thing is other expenses.
Right.
So the area which you are touching upon is the other expenses.
Hmm.
So when you see the other expenses, there is number of items, and the companies that specify any item which is more than 2% of the turnover, when it is material, we have to give it as a separate line item,
Right.
if I'm right. So this is how we bifurcate. Now coming to the comparison with the previous year, we have, like I said in an example, that suppose the sales of the previous year changed with the sales of the current year, then we have to minutely assess what is the reason for the deviation. So
Hmm.
same way what we do is, suppose there is an expense, suppose there is a advertisement expense and it is a startup. If you usually see, any startup has lot of advertisement expense. So what you can do, you will take the party wise listing of that expense for both the years and compare those expense and take the samples from those parties and check out.
Fine. Very well explained, sir. I'm done with my questions. If any other moderator would like to ask the question.
Do you have any other question?
Yeah, just at the back of this conversation, Vikasji, I'm just thinking, like, can we discuss any challenges or common pitfalls that auditors may encounter when applying the requirements of SA 530 in practice, and how can these be mitigated? Like, what are the common pitfalls?
550 or 530?
Yeah, sorry,
550 or 530?
530. Of course, we're talking about
530.
530.
Okay.
That's what I said.
So yes, see, we are the auditors. We have to cater the society. So we have to take up all kind of client. So sometimes it happens that client is not having the sufficient papers, or sometimes it happens that uh, the practical situation is such that documentation does not exist, or
Hmm.
uh, the there is a threshold to check the internal control over financial reporting. Sometimes they are below the threshold, they do not maintain the internal controls. So those are the situations where we find that it is challenging for us to see that we have selected the sample and we find that the things are not going well. So in those situations we have to do the other audit procedure. We have to do the further audit procedures, because we cannot leave it. We cannot we have to apply our mind and we have to decide how we have to tackle this challenge.
Yeah, so how do you do when you don't have the sufficient work paper, or as you mentioned, not sufficient evidence? What are the other audit
We go for
procedures?
100% testing. We go for 100% testing. We go for two-way testing, or we check it from some another perspective. So this is how we handle that.
Thank you, Vikash. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to the answers to the questions posed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other question? So thank you so much. Now we come to an end. On behalf of Auditing and Assurance Standard Board of Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, I extend my heartiest thanks towards today's guest speaker, C. Vikas ji, for sparing your valuable time and sharing your expertise and knowledge with all our members on SA 530 audit sampling. Frankly speaking, I have gained a lot through your deliberation, and hope our members have also gained a lot through your deliberation. And once again, in absentia, in absentia, late to the Utsav Dogra ji also, I extend my heartiest thanks towards Utsav ji also for his wonderful deliberation. So I also thanks all the four moderators, Madam Ritu Sharma ji, Vice Chairperson of Jalandhar branch, Madam Asta Gupta ji, Madam Pooja Sharma ji, Madam Geetika Taneja ji, for sparing their valuable time and moderating this webinar in a very wonderful manner and coordinating the webinar with all within 6 members. It was a wonderful experience to have all here today. And once again, thank you so much, Vikash ji, for your wonderful presentation. And I also extend heartiest thanks towards all the participants of today's webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lal, sir,
Thank
for
you.
the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Anil. Thank you,
Thank
Vikash
you.
ji. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
You.